in last night, I hope that the Holy Spirit is going to sort of inspire new things for you as we look at this. You might see things that you never noticed before as we study this passage together. So quickly, let me set the context for what's going on. This is really important anytime we're just sort of like parachuting into a Bible story. Like what exactly is going on? So just so you're aware, Daniel and his people, they're exiles. They've been exiled from Judah, and they are under the reign of a wicked and oppressive empire called the Medo-Persian Empire. And at this moment, the kingdom is ruled by someone named Darius the Mede. And just so you're aware, this is important. This is the third ruler that Daniel has served under while he's been in exile. And by this point, Daniel has been elevated to a pretty significant place of power and influence. In verse 1, you're going to see this in just a second. We'll read through the whole story. But in verse 1, it says that Daniel was one of 3 officials that oversaw 120 governors of the kingdom. So Daniel, he's certainly in a place of political power. When the Persians came in and took over the kingdom, Daniel, I mentioned he was in exile. They took over the kingdom. Daniel was spared. And this was ultimately due to God's protection over Daniel. But we see in the 5th chapter of Daniel, I encourage you, go back and read through Daniel if you've never done this before. But in the 5th chapter of Daniel, Daniel also has this supernatural ability to interpret dreams and to interpret strange writing on the wall. So Daniel has proven that he is a pretty valuable guy to have around. And King Darius, he recognizes that. So that's a little bit of what's going on. Also, this is an important detail that I think it's easy to miss. By now, Daniel is around 80 years old. He's 80 years old. He's been faithfully serving the Lord for many years. Let's take a few minutes here, and I'm going to read this account for us and try to turn the page while I have a microphone here. But Daniel chapter 6, we're going to read verses 1 to 24. And I'm reading from the English Standard Version here. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever." All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had the windows in his upper chamber open towards Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?" The king answered and said, "The thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then before the king, Daniel, who was one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king established can be changed. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at the break of day the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Well, what I want to do this morning is I want to look at this story really under three different headings. Within the story, chapter 6, Daniel in the lion's den, I think there are three key themes that we see, and I want to spend some time on each one of these themes. I'm going to let you know what they are, and then we're going to sort of work through them one by one. Here's what we're going to see. First, we see the persecution of Daniel. Next, we see the devotion of Daniel. And finally, we will see the preservation of Daniel. So if you're taking notes, or if it just helps you sort of think through what we're looking at, those are the three big categories that we're going to look at. First, let's take a look at the persecution of Daniel. I've already mentioned it before, but remember, Daniel is in a very important place when it comes to power and influence. The kingdom that Daniel oversees, it stretches from modern-day Libya and Egypt all the way to India. And Daniel is one of three governors that is set to be promoted. In verse 3, it tells us that Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials because he had an excellent spirit within him. In fact, we read that the king was getting ready to set Daniel over the entire kingdom. Daniel was a man who had proved that he could be trusted. Kings don't just give this kind of responsibility to anyone. In the short amount of time that Darius was acquainted with Daniel, he could already tell that Daniel was a man of integrity. Even though Daniel was living in a culture that had really no regard for the one true God, Daniel had learned to live faithfully as an exile. Here's a key point that we're going to see in greater detail here in a minute. But Daniel's integrity and his ability not to compromise and remain true to his convictions, all those things, they stem from the fact that he had a close relationship with the one true God. Time and time again, Daniel continues to show that his trust, his security, his peace is in the Lord. Well, it might appear at the beginning of Daniel chapter 6 that things are going pretty well for Daniel, right? At least as well as can be expected for someone who's exiled from his homeland. But secretly, behind the scenes, the officials have conspired to form this plan against Daniel. And the key reason for this, I think, is because they are jealous. They don't want this Hebrew exile to be promoted to a place of power. So together, they come together and they're trying to figure out, how can we take Daniel down? Like, where's the dirt on this guy to make sure he doesn't get this promotion? Where can we find it? But Daniel is free from corruption. There's no dirt that they can dig up against Daniel. Verse 4 says they could find no ground for complaint or any fault because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Wouldn't you like to be that kind of person where people are trying to dig up dirt on you and there's absolutely nothing that they could find anywhere? It's like these guys are checking with their boss saying, we're looking everywhere. We can't find anything on this guy. We've talked to everybody who knows him. We've checked his internet and social media history. No questionable post. Blameless. Quote unquote, take him up. If they can find something in connection with the law of God, that's the only way they're going to bring him down. And that's, of course, exactly what they do. So they go to King Darius and they start by telling him a lie. We see this in verse chapter 7. The high officials and the governors, they trick the king in a way, right? They get him to establish this injunction that says anyone who prays to a god or man other than the king for the next 30 days, they're going to the lions. Really what they're doing, they're appealing to the pride of Darius. And in doing this, they're trying to get Daniel killed. But what is Daniel's offense? Why are these leaders trying to have Daniel killed? They're certainly jealous of him. We already pointed that out. But I think this ultimately, it revolves around the devotion that Daniel has for the Lord. The conflict that we see in Daniel's life, it's part of a greater battle that is taking place. In Daniel 6, we see nothing less than a battle between the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. Friends, throughout history, Satan has been relentless in his attempt to war against God's people. 1 Peter 5:8, Peter writes, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. The adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." This story may seem like it's nothing more than some jealous people trying to get rid of someone that's more successful than them, trying to get rid of someone who they don't like. But there's something profoundly spiritual that's taking place here. I doubt that anyone in this room will face the same level of trials that Daniel faced. But in some sense, God's people should expect to be treated like Daniel. Christians should expect to be treated as social outcasts because we love and serve God above all else. You might even have a family member or people at work who think you're foolish, who think you're wasting your time because you prioritize coming Sunday morning to worship God. You may be denied a promotion at work because you've refused to